This is Counterpoint, and I'm your host, Tanya Granick-Allen. It's election time for Ontarians. Yes, even though the scheduled election was still well over a year away, Premier Doug Ford called a snap election seeking his third mandate. But why was the election called early? Well, it's no secret that Ford has wanted an early election for some time. For the past 70 years in Ontario, once the federal Conservatives win an election, the incumbent Conservatives in Ontario lose the following election. That's the pattern. It seems Doug Ford wants to get ahead of that. So in addition, and perhaps the most vocal justification for the election, which we frequently hear from Ford, is the newly imposed tariffs from the U.S. Ford has said that he needs a new mandate from the people so that he can take action on spending to counter the tariffs. The snap election also allows Ford to address mounting opposition pressure and to counter concerns that his leadership was faltering, especially as the NDP and Liberals gained traction by criticizing his government's handling of key issues. But with growing public dissatisfaction over issues such as healthcare wait times, doctor shortages, and housing affordability, will this election deliver to Ford what he truly desires? The coveted third majority? Well, we're going to dive right into that. And joining me to have that discussion is Michelle Simard, lawyer, and Michael Patton, both political commentators. Michelle, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your time. Okay, so why don't we start with you, Michelle, since you're at the top. Why did he call the early election? I mean, of course, I teased it out in my opener, but why do you feel he's called the early election?
Well, exactly for what you said. He's just getting ahead of it. He knows that a federal election is going to be called and it will ruin his chances because there's voter fatigue. And at the end of the day, he just wants to pull it out in front. It's going to be a cold one to do it, that's for certain.
Yes.
But and he's using the tariffs right now as the volleying bowl of why he has to get another mandate sooner than later because it's of such urgency. So he's not doing it completely selfishly as most people think he is. He's giving his reasons for it. Whether we believe that, that's a different story.
Mike, what's your take on the early election call?
Well, certainly you he easy to win, and not without some good justification. It's very interesting what's going on with the tariff and Donald Trump, who's now sort of the extra candidate in this election now. Doug Ford's really portrayed himself as a Captain Canada figure, stepping into the vacuum created by the lack of federal leadership from Justin Trudeau. And this has resonated very well in Ontario, and he's trying to take advantage of that.
Yeah, well, lucky for him that the U.S. President Donald Trump was elected, because I don't think he'd have any reason to publicly justify calling this election if it were not for this specific issue. So
Agreed.
lucky him that that hunger for that coveted third term may potentially be satiated, especially if the polls are indicating, or if the polls continue the way they're demonstrating. Michelle, have you had a chance to look at any recent polling?
No, but I did recently speak with a couple of candidates and from the other parties, and they're also of the opinion that it's very likely that Mr. Ford will win this election. There's not enough time for them to build up enough to compete against the PCs, unfortunately.
Well, I was looking at a poll from Ipsos Reid from, I guess, the first half week of the campaign, and it said, based on their polling, if the election were held today, 50% of respondents said that they would vote for the Progressive Conservatives, 24% Liberal, 20% NDP. So, I mean, that's quite the whopper in terms of a number there, Mike. Mike, can you
Well,
hear me?
it certainly is, and yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Um, okay, good. So it's quite a lift that he's getting, not just from the tariff, but also Doug Ford is kind of wearing Pierre Poilievre floaties because Pierre and the federal conservatives are so popular. That's lifting up the polling numbers for the provincial conservatives, and that's really been a great incentive as well, and an additional reason for Doug Ford to call the election.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because if we look at the other provincial elections that have been called coast to coast, we could see, for example, New Brunswick then incumbent Premier Blaine Higgs from the Conservatives. He did not enjoy that boost in polling from that. He lost. Then we go out west to British Columbia, where a relatively new Conservative Party, or at least newly reestablished Conservative Party, almost took it. And that was shock. Anyhow, we'll come back in just a few moments.